When it comes to the star rail characters with the highest overall value for pulling, most players would point you towards the support category, and specifically damage amplifiers. Their ability to increase your team's damage is just so valuable when the objective for endgame game modes is to clear through large health pool enemies as fast as you can, and unlike damage dealers, their success doesn't depend on the enemy lineup. You really don't need to factor in weakness types or the number of enemies on the field when choosing one of these supports, and the best of the best can also work with a wide variety of DPSs, so you don't have to feel like you need to pull another limited character just to get the most out of them. Especially when you look at characters like Pela and Tingyun, who still have strong relevance despite being 4 stars from 1.0, it makes you think that they also don't fall off nearly as hard with time as damage units do. While that's definitely proven true to an extent, Bronya exists as a grim reminder that damage amplifiers are not immune to power creep, whether it be by new releases overtaking their niche, or a general shift in the design of all of the new characters. Bronya is still a very capable unit, don't get me wrong, but she does serve as an interesting case study given that she was at one point the most broken support in the game. So let's look back on exactly what happened between then and now, and break down every shift in kit design that led to her downfall, as well as what could possibly be done to help her now that we've gotten to this point. But before we get into it, this video is sponsored by Tribe 9, a brand new free-to-play action RPG for mobile and PC platforms developed by Akatsuki Games, whose other work I recently talked about in another video. In a futuristic version of Tokyo, you play as Yo Kuronaka, an amnesiac fighting to take back his memories. Roam through city areas with your allies in a 2.5D overworld, and then engage in combat in a 3D real-time action arena brawler. Battles have you using 3 party members simultaneously, so you can choose whether you want to be right there in the action or play supportively from the sidelines. Trigger perfect evasion to avoid damage, or deflect to parry and create openings, where the game's tension system further rewards you for executing clean gameplay. Assemble a collection of unique characters that you'll learn about through the story, and customize their roles in battle to suit your playstyle. If this interests you, you can download today to get a free limited time character skin and a bunch of materials to help you get started with the game using the QR code on screen or clicking the link in the description and pinned comment. Thank you again to Tribe 9 for supporting the channel. Let's start all the way at the very beginning. 1.0 was a very different time. Since team archetypes, which consists of a select group of strongly synergizing units, weren't even a concept, teams simply consisted of 4 individually strong characters. And this environment explains a lot about why Bronya was designed the way she was. To begin with, she granted the most buffs in the game, with attack on her technique, attack and crit damage on her ultimate, defense from her Ascension 4 trace, and a permanent 10% damage increase for her A6. But her strongest ability by far is her skill, which fully advances the target ally's next action, increases their damage by a significant amount for that action, and removes a debuff. It was very obvious that increasing the amount of attacks your DPS could do was powerful, which is why it was given the drawback of being a skill point sink. Other supports were much more forgiving with their skill point economies, so it was generally expected that if your DPS and Bronya were both constantly using SP, that there would be times you'd have to use her basic attack, and that completely explains why her entire talent, in Ascension Trace, and in Eidolon is dedicated to it. After a basic attack, Bronya's next action is partially advanced. This fits her overall design being about action advance and lets her next skill be used faster. Her second Ascension trace gives her 100% crit rate on her basic attack, which is meant to play off the fact that her ultimate scales with crit damage. Why not let her actually use that stat for herself? We've actually seen this used again very recently with the Remembrance Trailblazers last Eidolon, but the difference is that Mem has 2 AoE attacks. Bronya's E4 follows the same trend, basically doubling her basic attack damage. The idea is definitely there. If you're going to have to basic attack sometimes, then maybe you should have a little bit extra on it. Nowadays, the damage contribution is so minimal that these are essentially dead passives, but back then Bronya already had the strongest and largest amount of buffs, so it's understandable that they diverged a bit from her support identity on these. Newer characters are definitely hyper optimized to play to their niche and nothing else, but early on, characters were made to be a bit more flexible, which is now understandably considered outdated design. A few patches later, Bronya would get some pretty big indirect buffs in the form of skill point friendlier DPS units. Blade and Jingliu both needed to use skill points to enter their enhanced states, but once there, their enhanced attacks didn't gain nor consume any, leaving more for Bronya to take advantage of. But it was around this time where we started to get an idea of one little annoyance Action Advance had. Jingliu's damage increases dramatically with her enhanced state, but she needs actions to charge it with her unenhanced skill. Buffing Jinglu in her normal form means you lose a lot of the damage value, especially with her self-action advance making the buffs run out even faster. Bronya was still undoubtedly an amazing enabler for her, but this was rather inconvenient at times. It was kind of just accepted that this would end up happening when you run a Harmony character that applies temporary buffs to your allies, as opposed to Nihility units that increase your damage through debuffs, which last based on the enemy's actions. Kind of unfortunate considering both action advance and temporary buffs are a core part of Bronya's design, but it couldn't be helped. That was until 1.6, when Renmei showed how it could be pulled off. Her kit was completely ahead of its time, in large part to all of her buffs taking a page out of Asta's talent, since they're applied as a field to the whole team, with a timer that counts down on only Renmei's own turns. Her kit demonstrated that fast characters didn't necessarily have to speedrun the end of their buffs, but the sheer power of being the only unit with access to constant action advance made Bronya still a very valuable support, and no new support could take that away from her. Well, until 6 weeks later when that kind of happened. The second half of 2.0 brought us Sparkle, who clearly started to encroach on Bronya's territory with a single target skill that action advanced and plenty of damage buffs. However, Sparkle was designed with another particular niche in mind, being her skill points. Her talent increases the max number of skill points for the team to 7, her technique generates an extra 3 at the start of battle, and her ultimate restores 4. So while she still needed to use lots of skill points, her generation mostly offset it. And if you did need to use her basic attack, it at least didn't stunt the frequency of her high priority ultimate thanks to her A2 trace giving it equivalent energy regen. Her skill crucially only provides 50% action advance instead of 100, leading Sparkle to have pretty different use cases from Bronya despite their similarities. And with Sparkle's Ascension 4 trace, we can see that the devs were already familiar with Bronya's one-turn buff problem. It makes it so the one-turn crit damage buff from her skill lasts until the target ally's next turn, allowing follow-up attacks and late ultimates to actually be able to utilize the buff's damage. This is on top of her talent and ult buff being able to be up permanently with careful timing, as activating it on your DPS's action interestingly won't consume the duration for that turn. 2.2 saw Robin's release, which had pretty much the same effect as Renmei, being another buffer that easily achieves high uptime on them. Her iconic ultimate fully action advances the whole team, but Bronya still had the upper hand when it came to enhancing hypercarries. But by this point, pretty much every new unit fell under what I'd consider modern design. Every character had strong tailored synergies for specific team archetypes, and there was a clear shift towards more specific combat niches. So while Bronya maintained her status as a strong support you might want in any hypercarry setup, she also didn't feel like a necessity to have in any team. It also didn't help that her best partners were slowly losing value over time due to lacking team archetypes of their own. But at least she still had that untouchable 100% action advance that could very well become sought after with the release of new DPS characters, so her niche was safe for now. When Sunday was first revealed for 2.7, it was clear he was designed in preparation for Remembrance and Memo sprites with 100% action advance for an ally and their summon. And given recent trends, it was logical to assume he'd be the best in slot for those teams while being lower value in other comps. Well, his skill also gives summoner characters an additional 50% damage boost, which is certainly significant, but the rest of his kit is so good that missing out on that actually doesn't feel that impactful. With crit rate and crit damage, damage percent, action advance, and energy, he provides everything a hypercarry wants from a support. But what really makes Sunday broken is how easy it is to use him at full potential. His skills buff lasts for 2 turns by default, his talent lasts for 3, he regenerates the skill point used when his skill's target is buffed by his ultimate, and his ultimate counts down on his own turns. Another interesting plus in his kit is actually the lack of an attack buff, because he won't be losing any value when paired with future characters that only scale with HP or defense. I was honestly shocked to learn that there wasn't more of his kit locked behind summons because it makes him so similar in role to Bronya. His A6 trace even takes the debuff cleanse niche away from her for the sake of more streamlined gameplay, despite every modern healer already having easy access to it. Bronya's first Eidolon gives her a 50% chance to restore a skill point and can't be triggered consecutively, and her signature light cone does regenerate 1 every 2 ultimates, but it still really doesn't come close to the level of comfort Sunday has. I guess it isn't that crazy to think that the standard banner 5 stars would be the most likely to get directly power crept, and Bronya had a really good foundation for her design that was surrounded by outdated features, so I can understand why Hoyoverse would have felt it's time to replace her in this way. But now that Sunday exists, if Hoyoverse were to end up buffing the standard pool 5 stars, how could Bronya possibly carve out her own niche? Well, there was one other instance where a standard 5 star saw a limited 5 star come out that fulfilled their same niche, and of course I'm talking about Clara and Yunli. At a glance, Yunli is a strict upgrade to Clara, with both being physical destruction characters focused on taking hits to perform counter follow-up attacks and having defensive mechanics to support that playstyle. And while Yunli's damage ceiling is undoubtedly much higher than Clara's, Clara actually manages to maintain a strong separate identity because she is much easier to play. Unlike Yunli, she doesn't have to time her counters to get the most value out of them, and she also has increased target probability in her base kit, while Yunli's is locked behind her light cone or a specialized support that isn't providing as much general value as other options. Although I don't exactly like this utility not being in Yunli's base kit, I think the contrast between these two was well executed. Clara established the playstyle that Yunli later refined, but Clara's straightforward abilities are very well suited to a standard character that a player might pull on the beginner banner or get at any time from losing a 50-50. I think it would be really good for the game if all the standard 5 stars were to align with this philosophy, especially Bronya, since she no longer feels like she has much that makes her stand out. Something important I haven't mentioned yet is that full action advanced supports get the most value by being 1 point of speed below their damage carry. This effectively lets your DPS get back-to-back attacks. But we all know how unrealistic it is to get the right speed substats on your relics, even with the recent additions that can marginally help due to the random nature of relic rolls. Especially when you factor in the speed breakpoints to get extra actions within cycles, and it's genuinely a headache to try and perfectly align the speed stats of 2 characters. Sure, you don't necessarily need to care about it, but you aren't using your action advance at its full potential unless you are speed tuning. So why not make Bronya the easy to use action advancer, since her skill point economy and damage buff uptimes are never going to be better than Sunday's. Bronya's new talent could be something like this. The most recent target of Bronya's skill receives the commanded effect, similar to how Jade marks an ally as the debt collector. After the commanded takes action, Bronya's next action is forwarded by 100%, and this effect cannot trigger consecutively. There might be more text needed to ensure it works similarly to -1 speed as intended, and some other quality of life adjustments would certainly help her, but I think this change alone would prolong the longevity of her role as a powerful beginner character. She might not be the best at what she does when it comes to optimized teams and equipment, but being able to function at 100% with no stress would be really nice. Bronya sits in a weird middle ground when it comes to the early characters of Star Rail, because she still inherently has a lot of value, but the standards for kits have changed so much that she needs something a bit more than simple tweaks. As one of the main characters of the Honkai series, I think Bronya is long overdue for a little bit of help, and with the recent announcement of character buffs, this seems like the perfect opportunity. The version 1 limited 5 stars are still much more likely to be the first targets for buffs, but until they say the standard characters are out of the running, I will be praying for them. I hope you found this video to be interesting or insightful. Subscribe for more Honkai Star Rail discussion videos, and as always, thanks for watching.